Welcome to Politics Now, where we're sitting down with as many of the 2020 presidential candidates as we can. Today we welcome businessman Tom Steyer. Thanks for being with us, Tom.
Steve, it's a treat to be here with you.
Let's address right out of the gate the elephant in the room. You are a very rich man. You built your own business, a hedge fund to $20 billion. Very successful, as we've seen from some of your television ads. Some people are saying you're trying to buy your way into this race. Are you?
No. Look, what I'm doing in this race, before last week, I was the last person to get into this race. And what happened was I was watching the debates and I felt like no one was leveling with the American people. No one was telling the truth about what's really going on in the United States of America, which is that the government's been bought by corporations. That it isn't serving the people of the United States. It's not even trying to.
You don't think Bernie Sanders was making that case?
I don't believe anyone was talking about structural reform of the government so that, in fact, it would go back to serving the people. I also felt like no one was addressing the urgency of climate change. So I did, look, for the last 10 years, I've been organizing coalitions of ordinary Americans to stand up for their rights and take on unchecked corporate power, and we've been winning. And what I've done every time is I've put in my time, my effort, and my money to go after a big problem that I think isn't being addressed in America. And I've taken on the oil companies and beaten them. I've taken on the tobacco companies and beaten them. You know, I started the Need to Impeach movement. And I also started one of the largest grassroots organizations, Next Gen America, that's been in Nevada since the beginning of 2014. And we're on almost every campus in Nevada. And we are the largest youth voter organizers in the country. But each time I've done exactly what I'm doing in this race, which is to say I saw a big problem and I went after it as hard as I could, and that's exactly what I'm doing here.
People might be surprised, I think, to find that you support getting rid of Citizens United, even though in 2016 you put $87 million into Democratic races around the country, and you put about $47 million into your own bid right now. But you want to get money out of politics.
Of course I do. But what I did, you know, people always think that I give money to candidates. Actually, what I do is grassroots organizing. You know, through Next Gen America, we register, engage, and encourage voters to vote. You know, I have a deal with 7 national labor unions to go door to door to knock on the doors of people who don't normally vote and talk to them about what they care about and, you know, exactly why they're not voting. And we've been doing that. In 2016, we knocked on 15 million doors. In 2018, we knocked on 10 million. We knocked on 500,000 doors in Nevada last year.
And you've got a lot of younger people
Steve,
involved in Next Gen America.
We do. You know,
what's the secret sauce to that? How do you do that?
Well, it's organization. You know, the young people in the United States are the largest generation in American history. They're the most diverse generation in American history. They're very progressive. They were voting at half the rate of other American citizens. And basically what we said is, that's not democracy. We went into 38 congressional districts. They were voting at less than 1 in 5. We more than doubled the turnout of young people in those districts.
And how did you do that? How specifically did you get young people who were obviously not engaged, but you got them engaged? How did you do that?
Well, they thought the system was broken. You know, we've had hundreds of thousands of conversations. I've had hundreds of conversations. Ask them, and they say, neither party tells the truth. Neither party addresses my actual needs. This system is broken. Why would I vote?
It sounds like
that's the start of a conversation.
Right. It sounds like something familiar.
Yes.
Like what you just said.
It is. And so what we say, what I'm trying to do with young people is say, let's have a conversation. The conversation itself is the starting place. And so, but if you don't have a conversation, that means you're organized enough. If you're a 22-year-old young man, being organized enough to get someone to have that conversation with you. Most young people don't go to a residential college. We're on all the college campuses, but that's easy because they've been organized for us in effect. What we have to do is figure out whether through social media or door knocking, how do we get to people just to have the conversation to say to them, if you guys show up, everything changes for the better. And it's really important for your future that you guys show up, that you men and women show up at the voting place. And we were in 38 districts, 33 of them flipped to being Democratic.
Not a bad record. You were out front on one issue that's center stage now, and that's impeachment. But you were like John the Baptist, a lonely voice in the wilderness. Back in October 2017, people didn't want to hear it. Republicans still don't want to hear it, but Democrats didn't want to hear it.
No, they're mad at us.
And you would not shut up about it. You kept on this. And now you have a lot of friends who are behind you on this whole issue. What did you see that they did not see?
I saw that it was a question of right and wrong. The reason I pushed on impeachment was I believe when there's a question of right and wrong in the country that we have to stand up for what's right. And that everyone was saying, no, this is a question about political tactics in the 2018 election for Congress. And I said, stop worrying about the 2018 election because it'll be fine. And we're going to do a ton of organizing around it, and we're going to go talk to young people, and we're going to knock on doors. But we have to deal with right and wrong at the heart of American society, which is the White House. And if we don't stand up for what's right at the very heart of American society, we take a terrible risk. And you know, some people don't know. My dad was a lawyer. First generation in his family to go to college. He was a lawyer. He left the law to become a naval officer in World War II, and then he prosecuted the Nazis at Nuremberg after the war. And he always said to my two older brothers and me, look, when you see something really wrong in society in America, make sure you fight it. Because if you don't, it grows. And he said, I watched it when we were prosecuting the Nazis to see how bad it can get. I mean, we're nothing like that. But he was saying, it's right and wrong, and don't miss the idea that somehow it's tactical political consideration. It's right and wrong. And that was the difference in 2017. It was very clear that Mr. Trump was absolutely breaking the law from the first day he was there. He was corrupt. He was obstructing justice. Everybody knew it. The question is, were we willing to do something about it?
And in your ads that you've been airing, you also talk about Trump as a fraud and a phony, and you say you want to contrast your record in business against his. It's been widely speculated that Donald Trump is not as rich as he pretends to be, that it is a function of marketing and image building and whatnot, and that he shies away from anything that would get to the heart of that. You said you listened to the debates and didn't hear anybody talking, but is that contrast, wanting to make that contrast, also one of the reasons you got in the race?
Well, I'll tell you why that's important, Steve. I mean, I have no personal animus towards Mr. Trump. As far as I'm concerned, I'm only upset about what he's doing to the American people. But he is basically going to run, if he isn't thrown out of office through the impeachment process, he's going to run saying, you know, I acknowledge that I'm not a good person. He's going to openly acknowledge that because it's so obvious. But I'm important to the economy. And the reason I've been making the point about business is, I mean, we're in Las Vegas, Nevada. He failed with casinos on the East Coast every single time, exactly the same. And what's important is he failed the same way as a business person and went bankrupt, just the way he's failing as president, which is when I said he's a fraud and a failure. He over-leveraged, he took on too much debt, he over-promised, he said he was going to do all kinds. He named his casino the Taj Mahal. Yeah. It's it's an empty hulk on the beach in Atlantic City. And then he failed. And what I'm saying is, that actually matters, because he never understood business. He always had this extremely short, vision, and it never got to paying off his debt. It never got to the next step. It was always about today. And that's exactly what he's doing as President of the United States. His tax plan is going to go down in history as the worst legislation in American history, and his trade war is a total failure. And those are his two economic actions, his two critical economic actions, both extremely short-term, both extremely destructive for Americans, attacking working Americans. And so it's actually important when I say he's a fraud and a failure as a businessman, because he's a fraud and a failure as a steward of the American economy. And just like with his failed casinos in Atlantic City, he acts in the short run and the chickens come home to roost, and he's nowhere to be found.
You are calling in your campaign for what you call structural reforms. You said earlier, the government is broken and we need structural reforms. And those things include term limits for members of Congress. And so I wanted to talk about that for a second. I imagine you also have a concomitant plan for lobbying reform, because if there's term limits, you get lawmakers who are in there, and just about the time they're really getting to know how the system works and how the levers and gears are pulled, it's time for them to move. But the permanent class, the lobbyists, they remain regardless of term limits. So how would you address that, assuming you could get term limits
Let me say
passed?
one thing about term limits. Term limits is about getting new and different people in charge. We're in Nevada. Nevada has the only majority female legislature in the country, and it would never have happened without term limits.
Probably true.
It is true.
Or at least not at this time.
The lobbying question is not a question of whether somebody representing an industry shouldn't have the right to go in and make their case to a legislator. Of course they should. You know, they should be able to say, this is how our business works, here's what's important to us, here are the jobs involved, all those things. The question is, should they be able to give money, have a campaign of money giving, so that when they go in, it's not a question of the merits of their argument, it's a question of the merits of their money.
So you would
That's
stop
the problem.
You would stop those donations.
There's no look. One of the reasons we need to get rid of Citizens United, the ability of corporations to be able to give money in huge amounts, is for that reason. It's not what we want is a legislator trying to figure out what's best for the people, period, without any attention being paid to the money being necessary for them to get reelected.
So it sounds like, in addition to Citizens United, we also need to address Buckley v. Vallejo, right?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, that's a decision that essentially equated money with speech.
Yes. Well, that doesn't freak me. What we need to do is get this corporate money out. And I can tell you, in Nevada, I've spoke to a lobbyist who I actually like and respect, who told me, we can basically come up with a program across the legislature to push something and get it done.
Oh, yeah.
And when I go into legislators' office, all of whom are Democrats, so it's Democrats, I know that for 2 weeks before I've gotten there, that the lobbyists from industry have been there every single day, and that in addition, that they've contributed, that they think there will be future contributions, and if they don't, do what the lobbyists want, that then those lobbyists will be contributing to their opponent. So that can't, look what we've seen, and you can see this government is broken. There's so many instances. The drug companies are a perfect example where they charge Americans 10 times what they charge Canadians for insulin, which is a drug that was invented in 1930. They charge us 100 times what they charge Australians for a drug. That cannot be right. And there's a law that says you can't go to Canada and buy the cheap drugs.
Yeah.
Who else could have written that but a drug company?
True enough. You also said, and NextGen has made this a priority, that the climate change is an emergency. On day one, if you're elected, you will declare it an emergency, refashion the federal government in all of its purchasing and all of its rulemaking to make it a climate change priority. And your goal is net zero by 2045. My question is that a realistic goal? Do you think we can actually get there, notwithstanding the cost involved? And second part of that question is, do we have that long to wait?
So those are questions from different sides,
Right,
Steve.
right.
It's like, can we do it, and is that good enough? Right?
I like to come at both angles for you.
So let me say this: we can do it. I believe this will make us much richer. I believe that it will create. I know it will create millions of jobs. Look, we always have to rebuild America. Everything wears out anyway. But we're going to have to rebuild it on an accelerated fashion. And in doing this, rebuilding America in a sustainable fashion, we're going to create millions of net jobs, good paying union jobs across the country. We're also going to get a chance, through dealing with climate, to clean up the air and water, particularly in the low income areas, the black and brown communities, where we have concentrated air pollution and water pollution. We are also going to get a chance to reinvent the United States. This is the biggest challenge in front of us. I said it's my top priority. I'm the only person running for president who will say this is priority one. Only person. But it's also our chance to take on the biggest challenge in history together and actually succeed, because we can do it, and lead the world again. Get back our mojo get back the idea that the United States is the value-driven, moral, technological, financial, commercial leader of the world. And if we don't do it, just to be clear, there is no second choice. There is no other country that can do what we have to do, and which, if I'm president, we will do, which is basically to save the world. And we have to do it, but I know we can, and I know we can do it in a way that makes us better employed, better paid, and healthier.
And I noticed on your website that people who might ordinarily be alarmed at what you're saying because their job is in an industry like oil, like coal, you have a plan for them as well. Your plan involves billions of dollars to ensure that there are wages and benefits and health care for people who are in those industries that you want to transition out of,
right,
and help them to get jobs in this new industry that you're talking about going towards.
We are not going to solve this problem on the backs of workers who are really going into industries to support their families. We're not going to do it. If industries decline, we're going to take care of those workers. But more than that, this is a plan to go, not just to dedicate money, which we have in the plan, billions and billions of dollars, but to actually go to those communities and say, what is the best way for us to do this? We're not going to tell you from Washington, we know your life and your family and your community better than you do. Let's devise a plan together. I'm a grassroots person. I'm very skeptical of people telling me, I know your life better than you know your life, so you're going to do it my way. I'm very skeptical of that. I like to go out and have direct conversations with people in the community to make sure that we're reflecting the truth, that we're building a program that actually serves them, that actually works in the real world, that just doesn't sound good in a conference room in Washington, D.C.
And you mentioned a little bit, you alluded to at least the concept of climate justice, of making sure that communities that have been neglected get attention that they have been denied so far. One issue that's specific here to Nevada that's not necessarily an issue of climate justice but of fairness is the Yucca Mountain issue.
Of course it is.
Which is this proposed nuclear waste dump. What's your stance on that?
I'm not for Yucca. I'm against Yucca Mountain. Look, when people talk to me about nuclear, I say, look, I'm not religious about this. There are issues with nuclear. Here are the issues. It's not cost competitive. People say, well, we're building one that is. And I say, fine, show me. There's a danger. There's a Fukushima type danger that you'll have some sort of disaster. Show me why it's safe. And third, there's the waste. The Yucca Mountain, you're talking about putting extraordinarily toxic material someplace for hundreds of thousands of years.
Millions.
Yeah. So it's like, okay, and you're telling me it's safe. Well, you've told me a lot of things that turned out not to be true. And so, absolutely, that's exactly my point. Let's deal with the reality.
Yeah.
Let's not just pretend it's okay and put it out of our mind and stick it in a Yucca Mountain where we don't have to think about it. Let's deal with the realities. And let me say one more thing. When you were talking about climate justice, the press and the people in the United States don't always know who the true environmentalists are in this country. Just for your information, the most environmental people in this country are Latinos, by far. The second most environmental people in this country are African Americans.
And what makes you say that?
Because that's the polling data. For 10 years, I've been working on climate. We've been we're putting together coalitions to take on the oil companies. How did we beat the heck out of the oil companies? By knowing who actually cares. By actually going to the people who care and talking to them about how shall we design this program. Give us your leadership, give us your input. That's the way to win with people who already agree with you. And people, everyone thought that the environmentalists in this country were white people driving Priuses. And there are a lot of good environmentalists who fit that unfair generalization. But you want to know something? If you look at this country, the people who care the most are the ones I'm saying. The environmental justice advocates, the communities that don't have safe drinking water, that get their kids get asthma, they are all in. And so when I think about climate, when I think about the environment, when I think about pollution, clean energy, you name it, I remember who in the United States really cares and who shows up. And it's important to make that distinction because this is not some top-down wonky thing. This is dealing with jobs, millions of good-paying union jobs across this country, and it's clean air, clean water, and it's reinventing America as a moral force in the world again.
Staying on local issues, there is a controversial ordinance that's gotten national attention in the city of Las Vegas, talking about a ban on homeless people camping on city streets. A lot of people have said this is criminalizing homelessness. A lot of your fellow candidates have come out against this ordinance, have even visited Las Vegas to specifically make that point. My question to you is, do you agree with them? Is this ordinance criminalizing homelessness, and what would your plan be in order to alleviate some of the homeless problems we're seeing around the country?
So yes, I do think it's criminalizing homelessness, and I actually have a plan on homelessness that more than doubles the amount of money. You know, when you look at homelessness, the first thing to understand is we have a dramatic shortage of affordable housing in this country, period.
Yeah.
And the most obvious and most painful aspect of it is the homeless explosion. And as somebody from California, I'm never going to throw stones at people from Nevada about homelessness, because I think we lead the world in homelessness, or at least lead the country in homelessness.
Yeah.
But I think the answer is what I've come out with in my housing plan, which is, first of all, to build a lot more houses. You know, improve and increase the stock of affordable housing dramatically. It'll take tens of billions of dollars. We should spend it. Well, it's a huge problem.
Why don't
but then
we have
there's
that
homelessness
now?
itself. Excuse me?
Why don't we have that now? What's the barrier to building that affordable housing? Is it that developers don't find it financially remunerative?
Yes.
It's not like zoning laws
it's
or
everything. Look,
okay.
I know it, and I've looked at it closely in my home state of California.
Yeah.
Developers would much rather build $1 million condo than build affordable housing.
Sure.
Cities don't really want to build affordable housing. You know, upscale communities are basically being prejudiced against affordable housing. They don't even want to build housing in California, because if you're a city in California and you build housing, those residents take services. But if you build office buildings or industrial parks, those places pay taxes and don't use services. So there's been this locally controlled zoning regulations preventing housing across the board. We're millions of units behind in affordable housing across this country. And homelessness is the most extreme example of it. So, we more than double the amount of money spent on homelessness in our plan. It's not just getting them a roof over their head, although it starts with getting a roof over their head. Yeah. In so many cases, you need wraparound services brought to where they're now housed. So this is a question, and Las Vegas is an example of where this can be done, but it's got to be done by focusing money, resources, attention on it, and the federal government's got to participate, and so do these state and municipal governments. But it's a critical issue. Housing is at the heart of inequality, Steve. If you think about where you live, it determines so much of your life. I mean, it determines where your kids go to school. It determines the air you breathe and the water you drink. It determines who you hang out with, determines how long it takes you to get to work, which in California people are doing hour-and-a-half commutes each way because they can't afford to live near where they work.
Hour and a half on a good day.
Yeah, but it's true.
Oh, I do.
So there's so much. It determines who you hang out with. It determines where you're registered to vote. So housing is at the heart of inequality in our system, and the government has kind of turned away and decided the market's going to work it out. Well, that is not true. The market, I've been saying from the beginning, unchecked capitalism has failed. It turns out we need governments. Okay, people have known that for thousands of years. The fact that we had to relearn it is a little painful, but let's just assume we now know we need a government that takes action and acts on behalf of the American people.
But you're certainly not a socialist.
No. I started a business from scratch.
Yeah.
I built a big business. I know we need a dynamic, competitive, innovative private sector. I absolutely know that in my bones. But I know I don't want them writing the rules. Because if they write the rules, they're going to write the rules for themselves at the expense of the American people. And that's what's going on.
Just a couple more questions.
I'm not a socialist. That's funny.
You have in your plan a item that says everybody should live close to a park or a national park?
You read our
absolutely
justice-based climate plan. Of course they should.
So my question, here in Nevada, there's a large amount of public land that's owned by the federal government, about 87% of public land. Some people in Nevada want that turned over to the state to sell, to develop, to do whatever. What do you think about that?
No. Look, and you said it's owned by the federal government, and I guess that in a legal sense that's true, but you know who that's really owned by? The American people.
The people, sure.
So do I want to take our inheritance in the case of Nevada? And you know, I worked on a ranch in Nevada. I've ridden a horse over northern Nevada. It's great. Do I want to take that and, you know, turn it into suburban sprawl? No, I don't. I mean, part of our plan in terms of climate is to make sure that we're doing climate smart communities. And that's part of rebuilding America. We can't afford not to be smart in the way that we rebuild this country. And part of that's going to be more dense urban spaces and a lot of open spaces. And having people have some connection to open space and nature and have that be part of their life, it's really important. You know, all the studies say that's really important for people, and it's really important to me, I can tell you that.
Well, I know you've got to head out to an event here, so I'm going to ask you one last question.
Is it a singer here, Steve?
That has to do with this direct democracy that is woven throughout, I think, your plans, including the ability to have national referendums, 2 a year, in which the people themselves would vote on various issues. This is something that, you know, you and I are from California. We have this initiative process. It's here in Nevada as well. There's no equivalent on the national level, but you're advocating for that. Can the system handle direct democracy?
Well, let me ask you a previous question, which is this. If we have a broken government, and we do, ask yourself two questions. Who do you trust to actually change it so that it works? Is it someone from the outside like me, or is it someone from inside the Beltway? And secondly, who do you actually think should hold the reins of power? The people or the politicians? And direct democracy is saying, actually, I think the wisdom and the compassion and the bravery in the United States resides in the American people. So, you know, you hear politicians all the time going, you know, they could pass something crazy. It's like, well, let's be clear. We have a broken government. You guys aren't doing so great. And also, there's stuff that everybody wants. I mean, I'm talking about I describe it as the rights of Americans in the 21st century. It's not a question of whether we have the right to affordable health care. Americans have the right to affordable health care. We may not be getting it. That means our rights are being denied. We have a right to a quality public education starting in pre-K. A right. We may not be getting it, but that means our rights are being denied. A living wage, clean air and clean water. I trust the American people. I really do. And if you're not for direct democracy, the question is, why not? What is it that you don't trust about the American people? And what is it about this broken government that you think is working so well? Yeah. You know, the point is, all the people who aren't supporting term limits and direct democracy, the question is, why aren't you? Is it that you're part of the system and it's working for the system itself? I know it's not working for the American people, and so does everybody else in this country.
Great, I love it. And I could talk to you about that for another half hour, but I got to let you go. So thank you so much, Tom Steyer, for being here on the show. We hope you'll come back as the campaign unfolds.
Steve, it's a treat to be here. Thank you for having me.
Sounds great.